welcome to the Aaron Werner Podcast on iCode Media. I'm Dr. Aaron Werner. Somebody told me that I do a poor job of introducing myself at the beginning. We just jump in, so I'm going to take a minute. And for those who don't know, I've got a practice in San Diego, a fifth-generation optometrist, second-generation practice owner at this location. Dad still works with me, and he now introduces me as his retirement plan. So it's pretty cool to see generations succeed and follow all the way through. Proud graduate of ICO. It's been a day or two, but still work with them a lot, have students in the clinic. And I'm joined today by two esteemed colleagues, Carl Urbanski and Andy Morgenstern. Excited to have them on because we are going to talk about something that we use frequently in the practice, but I don't think that we talk about enough out in the optometric space and clinic space. And so hopefully this is going to be a great conversation that you guys all appreciate. I'm hoping to continue this conversation because it's certainly not a one and done. But before we jump into what we're talking about, I'm going to have Carl and Andy introduce themselves. So Carl, I'll pass it to you first.
Thanks, Aaron. I'm also a second-generation optometrist. I have a private practice in Kingston, Pennsylvania, practice with my wife and classmate, Marty Scheip, and looking forward to have a good discussion on this committee that we spend a lot of time working on these guidelines.
Nice. And I just found out that you make maple syrup, too.
Yes, the Urbanskis are known to have some odd hobbies, that being one of them. So full-time optometrist, part-time farmer. Yeah,
that's awesome.
It's a good hobby. Well, I could have worse things to do with my free time for sure.
Absolutely. Well, my teenage daughters thank you because them and maple syrup go hand in hand. So cool, Andy.
Hey, how are you doing, Aaron? I just want to say thanks for having us on. It's a real honor to be on the podcast. My name is Andy Morgenstern. I live in Bethesda, Maryland. I, too, am a second-generation optometrist, so we've all got multi-generational optometry in our blood. My dad and my uncle, both ODs. Unfortunately, my uncle, I think he was PCO class of 66 or 67. He just recently passed away about a week ago, unfortunately.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep, terrible news. But we march on. And I will say, I don't know about you guys, but I think I might be the last generation in my brood over here. I function as the director of the on the AOA side of the evidence-based optometry committee, and I see patients, and I also work at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. We do some research on acute eye injury, blast injury, and vision dysfunction from traumatic brain injury. In addition to all this fun research stuff I do over here with Carl at AOA and the rest of our team.
So you do blast research. Carl makes maple syrup. I'm feeling a little bit like I need to up my hobby game here.
Well, it's our maple syrup bombs that we put together to, when we have to.
Very neat. So I have to ask you guys before we jump in, since we're all multi-generational, did you know you wanted to do this, or did it kind of spring on you?
I'll take that one first. I really didn't look at much else. Went to a small undergrad school here in my area and applied to, at the time, PCO, one optometry school, got in as a legacy and really didn't consider much else. So, and I still, after 32 years of being in practice, still love what we do.
Nice. Andy?
Yeah, I'd agree. I love what we do. Did I always know I wanted to be an optometrist? No, not at all. But I did know early on that my dad went to work. He was fulfilled. He came home happy. He had time to hang out with us. He was my soccer coach, not a good one, but he was a soccer coach of mine when I was a kid. And I think there was maybe it might be different today's day and age, but at the time it was an incredible life balance, and it seemed like a great science, health-based profession to go into, and kind of hit me right at the end of college that I really wanted to pursue this. He was a VT guy, and I ran away from VT as far as possible, but still in the same profession. Love what I do, and very happy that I'm a second-generation optometrist right now.
Oh, that's awesome. I did everything I could not to be here. Wanted to be a marine biologist and went on a research vessel and got severely seasick. But loved the science, and then looked at Dad and said, well, he's got a pretty good life. We had a great family life coming home, being raised, and It wasn't a whole lot of stress. You got to be at all our sports events, and I'm glad I chose to follow their path because I absolutely love, like you guys, what I do. So what we wanted to chat about today was the American Optometric Association's Clinical Practice Guidelines, and it struck me that not everybody was familiar with the Clinical Practice Guidelines. I'm going to stumble over that all day today for some reason.
CPGs.
The CPGs, which is a shame because they are fantastic, and I think it should be mandatory reading for every optometry student. I think it should be mandatory reading frequently for every optometrist, and I don't think that, well, I know for a fact you all don't get credit on your teams for the work that you do to the research behind these and put them together so that we have access to them. The one thing I do know in optometry is what I know yesterday is probably not what's going to be true tomorrow, which is great because we do a lot of research and we're continually learning more and knowing more. But that also means that how we treat and manage disease needs to change too, right? And we need to have the right people putting together, looking at all the data and putting the guidelines together, and letting us know what's where the guidelines kind of fall and what the information within the guidelines, how strong of evidence that is, and where we have gaps in the knowledge base, and then what things we can really hang our hats on, because at least for me, that helps me manage patients appropriately, right? It's kind of like building a Lego set. I have fourth year students, and we have them, read through and work through the guidelines, and I tell them that you can grab a bunch of Legos and put them together and build them. And once you start learning the rules of Legos, you kind of understand the patterns and what's happening, but it's always nice to be able to reference back to that guide to know what you need to do. And I can't do that with IKEA, right? And their catalog is not the best instructions, but which is why I use the Lego example.
We hope to not be known as the IKEA instructions of evidence-based medicine.
Optometry care.
You are definitely not the IKEA instructions, right? But they're fantastic and they're readily available, right? This isn't like you got to jump through 20 different hoops. You don't have to go through 4 different paywalls and passwords to get to, right? A quick Google search of AOA, and I will link them in the show notes, but a quick Google search of AOA Clinical Guidelines, and the link pops up. And I've got them printed, or not, well, I've got them printed, but I'm more likely I have them on my Kindle, so I can just read through them when I'm trying to look for something, or just on my own. So before we jump into the talking about some of the newest one that came out, Carl, give us a little bit of background on the clinical practice guidelines, what they are, how they're developed, how often they're updated, just what do we need to know? What's the Reader's Digest version of just kind of the overview of them?
Sure, Aaron, thanks. So we currently have 4 guidelines that are posted on AOA. Primary open-angle glaucoma being the most recent one that posted, getting the most attention right now. We also have the adult and pediatric eye and vision exam, as well as the very first one that we did, which the second edition is available of, which is the care of the diabetic patient. We'll also put together clinical reports really on new topics that are kind of really active in the profession, and the one clinical report we have up is on myopia management. And these are all available on AOA.org. They are obviously free to members, but they're also free to the public. These are documents that are for not only our profession, but other colleagues who want to use them, as well as the public. So the guidelines, we really follow a 14-step process that was kind of set forward with what used to be the Institutes of Medicine. It's now the National Academy of Science and Engineering and Medicine. And we build a group of people that are interested in the topic. We have on our each guideline group, we have optometrists, obviously AOA volunteers. We will have experts, content experts. We'll have a patient and a patient advocate on there as well. So you're representing basically each step in the healthcare cycle there, each part of that. All of us have to list our conflicts of interest. We don't want to introduce bias into this process. We really want it to be an evidence-based process. So basically we pick the topic and then we figure out what do we want to answer about this topic, and we develop questions. From those questions, we then turn it over to our librarian and researcher, and they pull all the relevant papers. Basically, we go about a decade back, but we will also never want to miss landmark studies that were maybe more than a decade old. So as an example, if we had set a 10-year guideline on papers for the glaucoma guideline, we would have missed, say, the Oates study or some of the really, or for macular degeneration that we're doing now, the ARID study, which was published more than a decade ago, which you would never want to leave out of a clinical practice guideline on those topics. So we'll assemble all of these manuscripts or papers that are pulled, and we have two readers, a scientific reader and a committee member who reads and grades these papers. So each of them is assigned an A, B, C, or D letter grade based on the quality of evidence. From those papers, our readers will pull out clinical recommendations. What do we want our clinicians to know and do from the data and the information and the science that's in that paper? Once we compile all that, we have a writer that puts together a manuscript. The committee reviews the draft. We also post it for public comment. So anyone within AOA or anyone in that wants to post comment from other professions can do that. We look at every one of those comments that comes back. We, as a committee, decide, did we miss something? Do we want to add this evidence? Do we want to look at this next paper? And then we come up with the final draft. The AOA board goes through it. Our AOA legal team looks through it, and then it is published and submitted. So that's, in a nutshell, kind of the 14 steps that we follow to put these together. And it's a very structured process, and we really try and stay true to the evidence and not have it be a consensus guideline. You can remember the AOA had multiple consensus-based guidelines, and then starting in 2018, 2017, I think we started this process of putting forward evidence-based guidelines, and the diabetic one was the first one that we put out.
I really like the structure. I too often in any discipline, ours or others, there's kind of that, the Wizard of Oz curtain. You're not sure what's happening behind the curtain and where it comes from, and so I really think it's important, and you all do a great job of outlining what every step of the process. So when you look at the documents, they're quite lengthy, and a lot of that is the transparency of what it is, so that you know what you're reading, you know what the matrices are, you know what the decision trees are. So it's not, hey, Carl thought X, Y, and Z, right? It fit this grid, and I may or may not agree with the grid. I agree with it, right? But at least I know what I'm looking at, and I know what the criteria were for the evidence grading or whatnot, right? Where something fell into or why you did what you did. So kudos to you all, because I know that is not a simple process to do.
Yeah, we have some really fantastic AOA staff behind us that makes us look pretty good, because when this gets submitted for posting, there's a lot more than just the 50 to 90 page guideline. There is all the papers we discarded and the reasons why, and we track all of that. And like you said, there is a lot of structure and transparency, and it's in place on purpose. Andy, is there anything you wanted to add on the process?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Aaron, what we do with the clinical, if somebody asks me what is an evidence-based clinical practice guideline, I always say it's not a document, it's not a paper, it's a process. Evidence-based is a process. And you hit on some major themes that I just want to kind of go reiterate real quick. Number one is transparency. When we come across evidence on our guidelines that we may not like, but it is the real evidence and it's the real juice, that's the stuff that needs to go into this guideline. We try to eliminate opinion and consensus like Carl was talking about. But at the end of the day, it's really important that these guidelines exist, because prior to these guidelines, and I'm sure we'll talk about this at some point, there could be a paper out there that says smoking is good for your health and it gives you vigor and, will make you live a long life. And there may be an example of a patient that smoked for 93 years and just didn't wake up one day and had a great life. And that case report presentation is published in the Journal of Smoking is Good for You. That's evidence. right? And so that could be published. And so really what happened was it was really through the Department of Health and Human Services. They were looking at all these evidence-based guidelines and said, hey, we've really got to put some control over this stuff because anybody can publish anything. We all go to meetings and we all go see speakers, and some of those speakers stand in front of a podium and, they say, here's a study that showed X, Y, and Z. Well, nobody really dissects those studies, really gets granular with it. And so I think it's really important to understand that what we're doing is we're taking the highest quality evidence and the best types of studies and publishing them in an organized format so it can be used clinically. Remember, these are called evidence-based clinical practice guidelines because we want these guidelines to be a tool for the doctor of optometry or ophthalmologist or technician or whoever to help guide their clinical practice based on the best evidence that's out there. There's only one way to do it, and that's way is to do it right. And that's what we try to do on every one of our guidelines. I do want to add, just because it hasn't been brought up, that Carl is the chair of our evidence-based optometry committee at the AOA, which is to say that obviously final decision-making goes through him. The direction of the guidelines, well, it's a committee consensus that we kind of agree on, but Carl is ultimately the chair. My job is to kind of keep things moving on the AOA side, to help the methodology, help the papers moving, make sure we're sticking to the rules, all that kind of stuff. And like Carl was saying, it takes a village. It really does, and it takes a special person to be a volunteer on the AOA Evidence-Based Optometry Committee because it is a tremendous amount of work, like Carl was talking about. So those names that you see at the back of the guideline, those folks, if you ever see them walking around in public, definitely deserve a pat on the back. They're doing some great work to enhance clinical practice. I'll turn it back over to you, Aaron. That's what I wanted to kind of gab about for a little bit.
No, I appreciate you very much sharing that. And so, Carl, I haven't worked on these guidelines, but I've worked on putting together other curriculum and whatnot. And when I hear you're the chair of something, I hear you're an expert cat herder. And I say that only half in jest, but it's really tough to follow the evidence because of our experience in clinic. And I don't take that lightly. I think our experience in clinic is important. But Andy, you hit the nail on the head, right? Anybody can have a case study. If I've had $1 for every time a patient told me that they heard somebody on the news that lived to 102 and the secret was a pack of cigarettes a day and a bottle of whiskey, right? I'm okay with the whiskey part, but the cigarettes I'm not quite on board with. Right? But things happen, and we need to go through the evidence. I also think that at least in private practice, staying on top of the evidence is tough, because not only do I need to stay on top of the evidence as it's being published, but I'm HR, I'm CFO, I'm CEO. Nobody cleans my bathroom toilet like I do, right? So I wear all the hats in the office, plus I'm a dad, and now a grandpa, right? So it's hard to do everything all the time. Yeah, he turned 1 last Saturday, so it's pretty cool. Thank you, being a grandpa. Yeah, it's worth it. It puts everything in perspective, right? So having people who help put guidelines like this together really takes a village, not just within the AOA and putting these, but in taking care of patients, right? Because my staff can't take care of patients if I'm not making sure they're paid and the HR is done and everything else. They can't take care of patients without the different education that like Chris Wolf with iCode puts on to help them be trained, and then to take and me staying on top of my clinical game with this kind of resources. Carl, one thing that I really like about this, and I've seen all sorts of different guides and models and things that we should do, is you guys do a really good job of putting a strength behind the clinical recommendations, right, in the guideline. So it's not just saying, hey, there was a study that said this is good or you should do it this way, but you put a strong recommendation or a discretional, hey, we want you to be aware of this note in the chart. And when you go and read the papers, you can see they have little boxes that break these down, and they're very clear about the strength of the recommendation. I think it's incredibly powerful. What was the thought behind doing that? And kind of walk us real quick through what the different levels of recommendations are.
So the first thing that really drives the clinical recommendation is the quality of the paper. So I mentioned the A, B, C, and D guide. Your N of 1 that you guys were referring to, that unicorn smoker who lived to 102, obviously that's a D grade paper because it was not randomized. It was an N of 1. That's not going to rise to an A grade paper, obviously. Examples of A grade papers would be your randomized clinical trials, systematic reviews with statistical analysis. B grade papers can be, say, retrospective or prospective cohorts, and then it falls down from there. And your case reports and your opinion pieces, they're really a D grade paper. So when we put together these clinical recommendations, they're the ones that you see featured in a box, kind of highlighted in a different color. That's some piece of information we really want our clinicians to know about. And it's supported with a high-grade evidence. Now, for example, when we did the glaucoma guideline, we pulled, I think, about 1,500 papers total. Some were discarded with our criteria, but we read more than that.
Andy's saying you pulled more than that.
Okay. All right. So I think we read 1,500. Let's say that. Okay.
Right, yeah.
So we maybe pulled 1,800 because 300 were discarded for whatever reason. They were non-English. They were animal studies. They didn't fit the date criteria. And we went through all of those papers, 2 readers on all those papers. That's why that guideline took quite a while, because there's just so much evidence out there on glaucoma. But one of the things that happens is you may have several papers on the same topic. So we have clinical recommendations, but then we'll also have an aggregate clinical recommendation where we had 3 or 4 papers. So we come up with a summary of those. That's the clinical recommendation, but we list out each of those below it and the grade of evidence. So our clinicians can be confident that what they're reading there is backed up by really good quality evidence. So that's why we grade every paper. We identify potential bias. We look at lots of different factors. So you have the clinical recommendation, you have the strength of evidence, risks and harms, harms and benefits. There's a lot of things that we look at that you can know that is a really strong paper.
I like that. And I don't know how you use it. I'm going to jump ahead. I was going to ask you, Carl and Andy in clinical practice, how, if you reference these. But I like referencing the grades of when I'm speaking to patients. And I don't get into this much detail, but I've come to realize that patients have as much access to information as we do, and sometimes more, because they'll pour a cup of coffee or grab a couple Red Bulls and they'll stay up all night, Googling whatever that I've shared with them, and they get all sorts of stuff coming at them. And it's interesting what people gravitate towards and what little bit of information or one study they hold on to. That's probably a totally separate sociology discussion. But I like to be able to, when I'm teeing them up, to tell them, hey, this is something that we know for sure. This is something that we suspect, right? But we're still learning more about. And so if there's any sort of difference between what I'm recommending that we're doing as far as treating and managing and what they may read online, they understand where I'm holding firm and why, and where there might be a little bit of more room for, for individualized care, I guess, because the evidence isn't as strong in that particular space.
So I guess clinically, I'm in private practice, so not that we're totally on an island, but these guidelines really help those individual docs. I mean, I have one partner with me who I can bounce ideas off of. If I have an associate doc, there's a third person. But again, if you're in a private practice, you don't have access like some of our colleagues that practice in that academic situation where you can go to a grand rounds or you can go and talk it over with colleagues. So these guidelines are really helpful. As far as presenting to the patient, again, like you phrase it, you can be confident recommending this treatment to them. Of course, anything we tell our patients is, and we say this in the guideline, it's often nuanced because you're still the doctor. You're the one making the call that this is the best treatment choice for them. But with the speed of clinical care evolution, it just seems like it picks up pace every single year. And the fact that we review these guidelines every 5 years almost seems too long in today's world, but we keep them as current as possible. But you can feel confident that what you're recommending to your patients based on these guidelines is backed up. And if it's not, we tell you it's not. We tell you it was a D grade or there was a gap. So you can really be confident that what you're telling your patients is really backed up by more than a study that, an N of 1 that was a D grade paper that they found this weird reference to on Dr. Google. So you can always find information, but you don't always know that it's accurate.
Exactly. I also really like how going through this, there's not a here's what you bill and here's how much money you make on this component, right? Unfortunately, I think a lot of the education that we do get is focused that way. And look, I don't run a nonprofit. I need to make money. I need to pay my teams. Right? I think it's important to run a financially healthy clinic because that's how you reinvest back in. But I also think it's important when we're talking evidence-based medicine to separate that from the financial side, right? Do what's right for the patient. Make sure you're billing and coding appropriately so that you're being reimbursed for the work that you're doing. But I love how that's not a piece of this, right? It's not you can only do this test so many times in a year or any of that, right? This is what the patient needs based upon the evidence. Now, to your point, Carl, you're the doctor. If something's different, make a decision. But I really like how that you guys have separated those two and focused just on the evidence of treating. I mean, the one I have in front of me right now is glaucoma, but the disease state you're looking at, or doing a comprehensive exam, right? And why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah,
Andy, how do you use these in clinic?
Carl, did you want to add something? I'll speak in a second. Do you want to add something, Carl?
Yeah, I mean, we really try when we put these together. Again, the transparency and the conflict of interest has to be there, that barrier.
Yep.
And, we really try, if we're talking about, say, instrumentation, for example, we really try and be brand agnostic with our recommendations. You don't say a specific brand of a field analyzer or an OCT. There's a lot of good ones out there. You're really just talking about the technology and the value that it has in diagnosing and treating our patients. So we really try and keep it at that level, and we're not there to endorse any one product or any one technology. And Aaron, you and I have been to enough Vision Source meetings together that we've heard over and over, what's good for the patient is good for the practice. So if you're providing a high level of care and taking care of your patients well, the rest will fall into place. I think that's as simple as it gets.
The Myopia Collective. CooperVision and the AOA have partnered in a groundbreaking initiative to change the way optometrists in the U.S. treat children with myopia. The purpose of the Myopia Collective is to rally the profession of optometry and its allies to interrupt the status quo and elevate the new standard of care for children with myopia. Every individual is encouraged to become a member of the collective. By joining, you commit to taking action to help slow the progression of myopia in children. You'll receive updates and information about the collective and its work in the fight against myopia, gain access to educational opportunities and resources offered by the collective, and hear from change agents, the ambassador optometrists selected to serve as advocates for community and policy change that facilitates the mission of the collective. Scan the QR code or click on the link in the show notes to join the collective today.
In the past, our focus revolved around prescribing MacuHealth or MacuHealth Plus to patients at risk of macular degeneration, while also recommending it to collegiate and professional athletes for enhanced contrast sensitivity in sports performance. However, this year's introduction of the Life Meter has been a game changer. The Life Meter revealed a concerning truth. Many of my patients have alarmingly low skin carotenoid levels, indicating potential deficiencies in essential body tissues like the retina and brain. Supported by over 30 peer-reviewed publications, Life Meter's accuracy, consistency, and effectiveness has been demonstrated across 2,000 subjects with diverse backgrounds. With this newfound insight, I can now have meaningful conversations about carotenoid levels with all of my patients, even those who may seem outwardly healthy. To learn more about this empowering technology, feel free to contact your MacuHealth representative or click on the link in the show notes. Together, let's optimize patient care and elevate their well-being.
Yeah, Carl, I totally agree with you. I'll also add, and Aaron, this is a really important thing. This is the American Optometric Association, and so we're looking at the U.S.-based doctor. one of the things that you have to realize is that we do eliminate devices and drugs that are generally not commercially available in the United States because this is a clinical practice guideline. We want to enhance the clinical experience between doctor and patient. And so putting stuff in there that's just not available to be used in clinic is not helpful in our opinion. So that's number one. I think you were asking me, how do I really integrate this into clinical practice? One of the things that we really haven't touched on yet is in the introduction to all of these guidelines, and quite frankly, in all of my presentations that I give, I lecture a lot and that kind of stuff, is, I always discuss epidemiology before anything else. What's the prevalence of a disease? What's the incidence of a disease? How common is it in the community? And, Carl and I were having this chat last night, understanding how prevalent a disease is in the community should dictate how much of it should be walking into your office, right? And so our guidelines set that epidemiological bit of evidence out there so doctors know to look for the horses and look for the zebras. And, we were talking, and I don't know if it was you or if it was Chris was really making the point, which I kind of harp on all the time, is that if there is a disease that has a certain prevalence or incidence rate in the community, and you don't if you don't diagnose that disease at that rate, you're missing something. Yep. And so what we're trying to do with all that epidemiological information is tell people what you should be looking for, and these things can come into your office. I think clinical practice guideline number one is, what is in the community, and should I be looking for it? And should I, if I'm not diagnosing it, am I missing something? Every one of us at some point in our career refers that kind of unicorn patient off to the subspecialist that says, "Hey, wow, that was a great pickup, Aaron," or "That was a great pickup, Carl." To me, I don't think we should have great pickups. We should just have pickups, right? And so understanding what's out there is important. I think the clinical practice guidelines do an outstanding job of it. But I also think it's on the doc to really know that for the major diseases, that just because we didn't write a guideline doesn't mean you shouldn't know how common a certain condition is. But I will harp on, going through the evidence-based clinical practice guideline on diabetes, the second edition that we did. One of the things, and we all knew that diabetes was a big problem, but one of the things that I realized as the methodologist, as I was going through all this stuff, was that as a profession, we've almost become numb to diabetes. We almost think that it's normal for diabetics to walk into the practice. If you were walking around in the 60s and 70s and 80s, diabetes was not a common condition. If you look at some of the data now, and, I have become a data wonk just because of the job that I have to do with these guidelines. Do all optometrists know that in the United States, that upwards of 16% of the U.S. population is either diagnosed or undiagnosed diabetic? Not pre-diabetic, not almost diabetic, but 16%, maybe even higher, because that was of 2022 data that we published, is diabetic. That's almost 1 in 7 patients that's walking through your front door that's diabetic. So now you've got to, because of that data, because of those numbers, we need to be aware of the complications of diabetes. But the problem is, I think we become numb to diabetes out there. I think we consider it to be a normal disease, which it's not. And then if you take it 2 steps further, now there's a lot of patients that are diabetic, maybe not, but a lot of patients that are diabetic that are taking GLP-1 inhibitors, right? So now there's a huge population of patients with the disease that's taking a huge type of medicine that may or may not have ocular complications. And understanding all of that data that we're kind of putting out through these guidelines will help you to look differently at those patients and maybe examine them a little bit differently to maybe try to uncover those diseases, so you don't have the unicorns, you don't have the, hey, great pickups. You just start having pickups because we're looking for disease that's prevalent within the community. Yep. So that's really how these guidelines really help me.
Nice. And I absolutely love that, Andy. It's when I got out of school, it's funny, in school, I was hoping for, train wrecks because you get really excited and you can tell your classmates that you saw a train wreck, right? And you got really upset with the healthy -2. Out of school, I got really excited for the healthy -2, and you kind of hope that you didn't have a train wreck because it pushed back clinic. It was probably 10 years, 5 to 10 years into practice when I realized that my thinking was backwards. I was going into clinic every day like it was Halloween. Like something was going to jump out behind the door and surprise me. I had no idea what I was walking into, right?
Right.
And I started thinking about, to your point, right? What's the prevalence? So if I've got 20 patients on my schedule today, let's just take your 16% stat, 1 in 7, right? Let's call them 21 patients to make the math easy, right? 1 in 7, so 3 of them. Is that right? Math, 1 in 7, right?
It's almost 1 in 7. Somewhere
almost 1 in 7.
1 in 7, yeah.
Okay, right. So I should have 3 to 4 patients that day who are diabetic.
Right.
And if I don't, I've missed something, is now my thinking in my head.
That's bingo.
Right? As opposed to, oh, thank God I only had a bunch of -2s and I could sell a bunch of glasses, which, don't get me wrong, I love the fact that, that we can give them great eyewear.
Still part of what we do, right?
Exactly, right? But what did I miss, right? And not only do I have the almost 1 in 7 for the diabetes, but what's based on my patient base and demographics, what's the prevalence of glaucoma? What's the prevalence of AMD? What's the prevalence of dry eye? All right, now I've almost got 70% of my patients should probably have something more than I need a pair of glasses or contacts. Or I'm not taking the care about them that they're hoping that I'm taking and they're trusting that I'm taking. And so understanding your specific demographics, right? Now I walk into clinic and say, hey, here's what I have on the schedule. Here's how many diseases I should either be managing or diagnosing and bringing back for further follow-up and management.
Right. And if I may, Aaron, let me
please
add on a couple of big whoppers. How many progressive myopes are out there these days? Right? How many women have autoimmune disease? How many women take some sort of Synthroid or thyroid supplemental medication? How many of our patients are wearing contacts? And when you add up all of those numbers, and those are just the horses, right? That's just the big stuff. I mean, it is an incredible amount of disease that's in the community. And it's really, I think as we are primary care providers, we've got to be on the lookout for all this stuff. But if you understand your prevalence and your incidence, like you're talking about, that you're advocating for, you're a better doctor. And these guidelines, in my opinion, are the best tool that we have, or one of the best tools that we have to supplement that knowledge base in the clinic.
Yep, I agree 100%. So I've taken 2, not perfect at it. It's more like once every 6 weeks, but monthly my goal is to go back and read and then reread. I'm never going to absorb everything all the first time. I'm going to pick up little things as I go through. And I'm relating them back to cases as I'm reading, so it's kind of neat because I'll go, oh yeah, I picked that one up there. Oh, maybe next time I see that I should have managed it slightly differently or looked at it differently. None of us are perfect, but we've started to use them with my team as well. So I'm not just telling them, hey, this is X, Y, and Z, but let's pull up the guideline. Let's see what the guideline says. And that way they know the decisions that we're making in clinic are coming from a place of evidence. They're confident in front of the patient, because we all know that I tell the patient something and that they immediately turn around and ask my team for their thoughts, because they want to verify and make sure we're all on the same page. I do the same thing. The minute the doctor walks out of the door, I ask the nurse questions. And so just having everybody have that same level of understanding within the office, I think, is really important. That way they also know I'm not doing things just because I'm trying to make money, right? That's not my intent, but they need to know that's not my intent. They need to know we're doing things because this is what the evidence says we need to do, right? This is why I want to see the patient back on the frequency that I want to see them back, or why I'm ordering the certain tests that I want to order, so that we're caring for them and whatnot.
I think it's also neat that we also have these, we do have those frequency tables in all of our guidelines on when to bring patients back, when to examine them. Great information. I also think some of the nuggets that we have in there are great flow charts. So if you don't want to blast through the whole guideline, if you want to kind of be like, hey, I've got patient XYZ coming in here. I know they have this condition. How should I take this exam? We have those flow charts set up to really, in a very concise manner, help direct the clinician through the exam. You can be a rookie or you can be a seasoned expert. I think this thing will assist, different clinicians in different manners. I don't think it's for one population only.
Yeah, we would love to have every clinician read it cover to cover, but we know that's not going to happen. If you just go in and you look at our evidence-based action statements, which are highlighted, as well as the flow charts and tables that Andy put in, that's going to give you a lot of clinical information in either that's new to you or a review of something you should be remembering and using.
Absolutely. Andy, you brought up professionals. It struck me last year. I was sitting at the Padres game and looked up at
I'm a Met fan, but that's okay.
Yeah. That's okay. We'll save that for after the episode. At least you're not a Yankees fan. It struck me because the Padres do a great job of hazing the opposing players, right, and putting up funny little stats. But what was interesting to me is that everybody's stats up there, and we don't think twice about the fact that we know everything about this player. Right? Are they in a slump? Are they doing well? Are they not doing well? We know everything about them, but we don't know, even to a minute level of detail, the most of us, of what we're doing in our clinics. Right? Where are we at? How well are we taking care of people? How well are our treatments working overall and managing people? And I'm not advocating that everybody go back and redo their databases, but I think knowing what we should be doing, right? Knowing the prevalence rates, knowing the steps. Is important because I'm a professional just like Manny Machado is a professional, right? And I guarantee you he's got a hitting coach and he's got a fielding coach, and I can go watch him practice and stay on top of it. Now I don't, you guys are both welcome to come to San Diego and we can hang out in the exam lane and you guys can watch me practice refracting. But I do think putting in the time as a professional is important, right? And that's where, print this out, download it, add it to your Kindle, whatever the case may be. But just reading it. And it's not hard to read through. You can be super evident or note taking and highlighting if you want to go there. Otherwise, just read it like you were reading a fiction novel, even though it's not fiction. But just read through it, right? And have that information bouncing around in your head. I think is critically important. And I advocate this to my students as they come through with ICO because it's important for them to know the resources they have. When we're in school, hopefully they're getting this information and knowing that it's available. But as they leave, right, that safety net that they have at school is not there as much anymore. And so being able to know where to get the resources, where to find the resources, where to stay up to date is I think absolutely critical.
Hey Carl, do you want to talk about the in the glaucoma guideline we have the hot sheet on all the landmark studies as well.
Sure.
I think that's something to notate.
Yeah, two things in what you just were talking about, Aaron, is we'd love to get this in the hands of our students as well. So I'd encourage everybody who's listening to this podcast, if you take student interns in your office, please expose them to these guidelines because I think they are incredibly valuable. And you can see Andy and I have kind of a passion for this. And all this work that we do is not useful if our clinicians and our students aren't using it. And I think the same applies for those that are out on the speaking circuit. If they can reference this, because it is evidence-based, it is supported by the clinical papers that are out there. So I'd encourage our lecturers to use this when they're developing the criteria and the topics for the lectures. So you mentioned as people come into your practice, the first table in our evidence-based guideline on primary open-angle glaucoma is risk factors, modifiable and non-modifiable. You're just simply looking through that, you're going to see things that you need to look at when you're analyzing that glaucoma suspect patient just by the risk factors that are there. And then Andy just mentioned we have another table in the guideline, and it goes through every one of the landmark studies, the ocular hypertension treatment study, early manifest glaucoma trial, advanced glaucoma intervention study. They're all there. And just in a simple table, you can kind of set a target pressure based on a percent of lowering based on these landmark studies. So you know that your clinical approach and how much I need to lower that IOP for that patient is really supported by those landmark studies. And it's all simply in there in a table format that you can do at quick glance, really get an idea in your head of where you want to set that goal.
Yep, absolutely. And those are helpful. I've printed out some of those and just laminated them because it's nice to have as a quick reference sheet. Just
refer back to them, sure.
Yep, absolutely. And we were talking before we went live, right? The beauty of primary care is that, I get to see everything. And the challenge of primary care is I see everything. And so my brain's not going to remember all the details of every study and everything I need to know. So staying on top of it by going back and rereading, but then also having that quick reference sheet. And sometimes even having the reference sheet to show patients, right? Hey, let me pull this out and show you exactly what I'm looking at, and here's why. We all have that engineer patient who we know is going to go do research,
right?
So point them in the right direction to begin with. That way you don't get the angry Dr. Google emails at 2:00 in the morning with all the different links that you got to go figure out if they're legit or not. So I applaud you guys for the way that you've set this up because it's very clear that you're walking me through. I'm going to use the word story in a positive way, right? I know what you're doing. I know why you're doing it. I know how you're doing it. And then you've given me the clear steps from the prevalence all the way through screening and then management and the recommendations on how I should manage and treat and the quality of that recommendation, right? How strong or not it is, I think is really, really, really useful and practical as a clinician. I got a lot of good education at school, but not all of it was practical. And so I think that the fact that it's a guideline for the clinic makes it, incredibly practical. And quite frankly, sometimes reading through the glaucoma one, I had a couple of aha moments, like when you said, hey, make sure you look for dry eye because you're treating them with drops most likely. They're going to have dry eye. You should be looking for dry eye. And hopefully I'm the only one that's guilty of this. I doubt it, though, is sometimes I get tunnel focused and I'm treating the glaucoma, right? What else is happening to the patient? Because I really should be treating the patient. And so just that reminder of, hey, remember to look for the dry eye, look for the other comorbidities that are there. And clearly calling it out, I think, was very big and, at least for me, super helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously clear that, most of our patients are allowed to have more than one problem. Right, but we tend to focus on the big one, and you don't always think about all those other comorbidities that you mentioned.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. When was the last time? Back earlier in my career, I won't say how many years ago that was. You would have a patient come in on one medication, right? Having a patient come in on 3-4 medications now is not an exception. It's the rule almost. It's there's a lot of patients on multiple medications, especially as they get older. And understanding all of those side effects, understanding all of those that's the stuff that's in the nitty gritty of this guideline that we get, pretty granular with. And so that stuff's important as well. I'm sitting here trying to sell something that's free. I hope everybody goes out there and downloads it. It's really a great resource. I do want to point out something else, and that's, I think, really important. The American Optometric Association is the organization. It's a member-based organization, as you guys know, and they're the ones that give us the mandate and the playing field to do our work. And so one of the things that I think the audience needs to know is that while the association kind of gives us the playing field to do this work, they are, as far as like a board of trustees go, and as far as the association itself goes, they know that the independence of the guideline has to be there, that the independence of the research has to be there, and that the truth to point of all the information in the guideline has to be there. which is to say that, if you can see this screen, that wonderful guy in the middle, Carl Urbanski, is the chair of this committee, and those are where the rules come from. And so we were talking about in the beginning the process. The process, we keep true to the process that was identified and developed for the purposes of producing the best clinical practice guideline to manage patients. And I'm very honored to say that we have that freedom to do the right work without interference from people that really oversee the platform that we build it on. And that's a really incredible thing, especially in 2025, to not have any interference in that department.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree completely.
Yep.
Yeah, and the other thing that needs recognition is the hardworking docs on our committee. I mean, we have a lot of clinicians, over the years that I've been on committee, we've put out, as I said, 4 or 5 guidelines that take some multiple years to do. And all these docs are giving their free time to the AOA and to this process. And they are a huge part of making this all happen in this incredible product that we put out at the end. If you think about the hours to read 1,500 papers, split amongst, we'll say 20 people, that's a good number of papers that we read. But as a volunteer, I don't think there could be a better committee for me to be on that keeps me a good clinician. Because reading all those papers has absolutely helped me in my clinical practice from day to day. Just I think these guidelines would do the same for everyone.
As a speaker, I've become a much better speaker because I understand the research that I'm presenting. Echo Carl's comments 100%. Look, all of us are busy. All of us are living in a challenging world. We're all trying to be the best eye doctors we can. But I do want to let you know that there are people on our committee that are presidents of state associations while they're volunteering for this committee. There are clinicians that are running clinics at optometry schools. There are clinicians that are running departments for major hospital systems. And of course, there are private practice optometrists trying to keep the office open, right? And keep the patients coming in and trying to keep their family well off. And so, Carl, I'm sure you would agree, we have an incredible variety of docs, from all backgrounds within the profession. I'll be honest with you, it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun that goes on. But let me tell you something, when we get hot about some of these papers, and, Carl, I don't know if you want to tell a few stories or so, but some of these conversations get hot because, we've got there's information out there. The question of interpretation of some of these studies come up. And, we've got experts and we've got some lay people and, it's so much fun because the discussion, at the end of the day, we're all incredible friends, and we're all incredibly respectful of each other. But man, our meetings are free to express your opinion, is what I would say.
Robust discussion is healthy, and
right.
Unfortunately, I've been put in the position to sometimes referee that and keep the conversation flowing in a positive direction.
That's
but
right.
as you said, we all walk away from that meeting friends. We go out to dinner. I've made some really good friends chairing this committee, and we'll go out to dinner, have a drink together, and it's all for the betterment of optometry that we're having those robust discussions for sure.
Absolutely, and we're all better for it. So we appreciate it. I told you were a cat herder. Right now you're a cat referee. So
we're
awesome,
actually
guys.
call a hockey helmet pretty soon. Maybe a white sweatshirt for next meeting.
Well, hopefully they're not as I guess entertaining as the last U.S. Canada game was, right?
Yeah, nobody dropped the gloves 9 seconds into our meeting, so.
Oh, good stuff. Well, really appreciate it. I would love to have you guys on because to dive into even more about the specifics and the learnings from some of the individual guidelines that have been put out. Right, understanding the overview is important, but there's a lot of good stuff in these and a lot of eye openings and ahas, like I said, at least for me, and I think for others. So I will certainly put the link to access these in the show notes. As Andy and Carl both said, they're free. If you are not an AOA member, I've been since first day of optometry school. I would strongly advocate that you do join, because it's not just about the political, I want to say evocation, that's not the right word, but the political
advocacy.
Advocacy, thank you. But it's this kind of stuff too, right? And it's all for the betterment of our patients. And we can't do what we do to take care of them without others supporting us. And AOA is fantastic in doing that. So please support your the AOA and support your local society. A lot of good people putting in time and money and passion. It's really hard to beat passion, right? It's you can pay people to do a lot of stuff, but it's really hard to beat passion. And we appreciate both your guys' efforts and those of your teams on this. So thank you very much. Got comments, those who are listening, thoughts, insights, please let us know. As Carl asked earlier, if you work with students and have them in your practice, these are fantastic resources. A lot of good discussions in the practice. So I have our students read them, and then we talk about them together and pull through their insights. I want to make sure, one, they know they're a resource, but two, we talk about what the current guidelines are and how it affects how we're taking care of patients every day. So Andy, Carl, thank you guys again very much for joining, and look forward to catching up next time.
Thanks for the invitation, Aaron. We appreciate getting the word out. Thank you.
Really appreciate it, Aaron. Thank you so much.